So what's going on YouTube? And again, Bidondi here, TruthRadioShow.com. So just going to talk about signs of the times here, which we're going to be talking about tomorrow night on Spiritual Warfare Friday. My guest, Diana Ketterman, joining us for the third time tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. So the links are on the other links. Biblical Warfare at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be talking about some good stuff, man. And all the links are posted and everything, so just give me a second. So heading out of work here, so wait for people to join on. What's up? Somebody's on here. So hopefully you can hear me, because I had a problem the other night when I tried to live stream off my phone. Waiting for a couple more people to jump on, so I don't have to repeat myself. What happens when you're randomly live. live. Alright, so 11 people popping on, so give a couple more. And again, it's Thursday, and tonight, Biblical Warfare, keep saying Spiritual Warfare, Biblical Warfare Friday tonight, and it's going to be a great show. And it's be fruitful and multiply. So we're going to talk about the population of the world before the flood. During the days of Noah and Adam and all that, we're going back to that and all that. So how many people were actually on the earth back in those days? You know what I mean? And you got to be surprised. You got to be quite surprised, because you got people up there saying, "Oh, a few hundred, a few million, whatever case, 100 million, whatever." No, there's billions with the B. And because the earth back then, it wasn't that we didn't have that many oceans. It was a different atmosphere. And I don't know if they, took 9 months to have a child back then. Things were a lot different then. You know what I mean? So how many kids could two people produce? A lot of people don't understand. My uncle, Bob, he used to own a printing company, right? He explained how that worked, and I forgot exactly what he said, but he demonstrated with copies. You know what I mean? You make a copy of something, right? And you use one thing to make a copy of, and it starts dissipating, unless you have other copies to back that up from the original. And I shouldn't even get to that, because I don't want to confuse everybody. Because I'm still trying to figure out. I remember what he told me. He's passed away now, but he mentioned that something in the matter that it is very possible. Because I know people out there. Oh, it's impossible for two people. It's the morning, guys. Forgive me. I'm just like, bleh, people say it's impossible for two people to populate the earth. No, it's not. Especially when these people live for hundreds of years. You got to remember, too, Adam and Eve, they didn't start off as children. Adam and Eve, when they were created, right away they were adults. And God told them to be fruitful and multiply. You know what I mean? So they started having kids right away. It wasn't just Cain and Abel and stuff. You know what I mean? They had many daughters and other children. You know what I mean? So you got to understand, right? And I know this is a real jarring of your reality, because we as a humans today, right? We grow old, right? We may live to see our great-grandkids. Some people are lucky enough to see their great-great-grandkids. I mean, my grandmother was, She had great-great-grandchildren before she passed away. So, and here's the thing, too. When you get older, probably like 60s, 70s, you stop producing kids, right? And you got your children that are grown up now, then your grandchildren, possibly going on to your great-grandkids, right? So you got to understand what was going on here, right? So when Adam, right, this is hard to comprehend, really is. So when Adam, right, they had their children went out and had children, so Adam and Eve became grandparents, right? Now, at that time when Adam and Eve were grandparents, right, they're still producing children too, right? Now check this out, right? So when their grandkids are born, they're still producing children. When their great-great-great-grandkids are born, they're still producing children. When their 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade children are walking the earth, Adam and Eve are still producing children. Seth is still producing children. Cain's still producing children. I know it's far-fetched to even believe that, but that's what it was back then. You know what I mean? They lived to hundreds of years. So how many children could you have in 100 years? My grandmother, she had 13 kids total, 14 total. She lost one. But yeah, she had 14 in her life, 14 children. And that was average back in those days, the early 50s and whatnot in this country. And so they had dozens of children in those days, in the days of the Bible, right? So When you're producing children and you're 300 years old, you're 400 years old, you're still popping out kids. You know what I mean? And so how many kids could you have in that amount of time? As you're having the kids, you're, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th generation of popping out kids, and all the way down. So you could populate the world, and oh man, it's astronomical. It really is. So yes, it's very possible for Adam and Eve, for those daughters out there, very possible. If you're living for 900 years, you know how many kids you could have in 900 years? Not that they had kids up to 900 years, I'm not saying that. But hundreds of years, you know how many children you can have? When your grandkids are just having children of their own, you're still popping out children. That's unheard of. Because we live in a society today, we can't register that in our carnal minds because that's not the way society is. So people right away pass off, it's ridiculous. No, it's only ridiculous because of the society we live in. Back then, it wasn't ridiculous. You know what I mean? So we could populate this world. You remember, too, the world, the earth, we didn't have all these oceans back then. And that's why hundreds, not few, hundreds of ancient cities are found under the ocean. That proves the Great Flood as well. Untouched cities, just sitting there in ruins, not even ruins, full cities under the ocean. They find them all the time. Because what happens when the flood came, all the lower level areas, I'll give you an example, right? So just say I had a house next to Tim. What's up, brother? Woo! So me and Tim had a house next to each other, right? And the little alleyway between our houses was like a little ditch like this, right? Obviously, no water in it, so we got a flood, right? Floods came, and went up to first, second floor, whatever. The flood subsided, but now, because of the land elevation between our yards, now there's a little creek there, right? So that's where the oceans came from, because the waters came from above and below. That's where the waters are, above the firmament and below the earth. So they sprung forth, waters fell from the out of the firmament, and the water, like in other words, from here on the East Coast, Rhode Island, right, on the East Coast in the United States, back then you could actually walk to Europe, travel to Europe on by land because it wasn't that massive Atlantic Ocean, and that's why there's tons of cities under that ocean because that's how it was. So when the flood subsided, it didn't subside on the lower lands, the low levels land, and now they're underwater. But what I'm trying to get at is, could you only imagine the population? It had to be in the billions. I mean, let's say we have about 8 billion people, and they say that's overpopulated. Not even close. We have less land than we did before the flood. Way less land. And we have 8 billion people, and you can still fit every one of those 8 billion people in Florida easily, in Jacksonville, they said. Probably a little more than Jacksonville, who knows, whatever. But you could fit the whole world's population in one state, easily. Might be crammed, but you could do it. You know what I mean? So are we overpopulated? Not even close. And anybody who's driven across the country, especially in the United States, there's so much habitable land that's no houses, nothing. You know what I mean? And people live in these big cities, and they think it's overpopulated because that's where they live. And if you don't like the overpopulation, just move. That's it. Whatever the case. But the population of this world, man, I mean, it's going to be even the AI, right, of all things. AI said it had to be over 10 billion people. That's a lot. We have only 8 billion. So, and I think it was a lot more than that, a lot more. Because you got to remember, too, the multiplication of the children. I mean, it's nuts to even, to even comprehend that. Because again, just like you say, Margaret and your husband, right, in the chat room, yeah. Margaret and your husband, right? You two have children, right? Your kids grow up, and they have kids, right? You got grandkids, right? You're still popping out kids. And then when your grandkids are popping out kids, you got great grandkids. You're still popping out kids. Your children are still popping out kids. Your great grandkids are born. They grow up, get married, and have children. You and your kids are still popping out kids. And your 5th generation, 6th generation, 7th generation, 8th generation, and you're still popping out kids. Right? That's unheard of today. I understand that. But that's what was going on back then. So could you imagine, only imagine, then we had the situation here, and it was even worse, because now what happened was the fallen angels started mating with the daughters of man and having children of their own. Then you had the Nephilim impregnating people, whatever the case, right? Yeah. So the world's population was exploded back then before the flood. it had to be billions of people in this world. And I'm thinking about, I couldn't even tell you, to tell you the truth. I'm thinking way over 10 billion people. Way over. I mean, I could be highly underestimating that number, too. And I would love to think of it as about almost 100 million people, billion, I'm sorry, 100 billion people in the population. Because you got to remember, there's more land back then. There was less oceans. Everything was very habitable, especially with the atmospheric pressure and everything else. You could grow cherry tomatoes the size of basketballs. That's where the hyperbolic chamber. You ever heard about that? The Chinese invented the hyperbolic chamber, and they got that based off the Bible. The theory of what the Earth was before the flood. And Ken Hovind did a good study on that too. So basically, in the hyperbolic chamber, there's twice as more oxygen than we have in our atmosphere, right? So NFL players and people in sports, they sleep in these hyperbolic chambers, and it helps them heal quicker. And again, you can grow plants in these things. The regular cherry tomatoes come out the size of a basketball, as a baseball. By